What up, everybody? BMF Season 3, Episode 2, titled Magic Makers, centers around the storyline of Cena getting locked up, leaving Meech and T without a plug. A problem we've already seen them have to deal with a few times in the first two seasons. Without getting too much ahead of myself, the big difference being this time is that their reputation preceded them and the plug found them, but not before a whole lot went down as a result of Meech and T desperately looking for a new plug. And when someone is moving out of desperation, they are more likely to make a mistake. Getting me to the start of episode 2. This episode starts off with Markeisha telling Terry that she doesn't think they should be living together and using getting shot as an excuse. This is after Terry already bought a house and moved Markeisha into it. Also keep in mind that Saint's already been dealt with for shooting Markeisha as well. So Terry let Markeisha stay in that house and now has to go get his own place. Because when Hoop asked Terry if he was all set, he told Hoop that he decided to get himself a bachelor pad first. As Terry got into the restaurant, Hoop turned the TV to the news, only to find out that Cena had been arrested. This storyline goes all the way back to the end of Season 2 when K9 got arrested. He gave up a bunch of names, including his Colombian plug Cena, but he wouldn't give up the Flannery brothers. K9 initially wasn't going to say anything at all and told the cops he was a straight-up G. Then they brought in Peaches, who told K9 that she told the cops where he'd been burying all his bodies at. This was when K9 started spitting out all the names. Coincidentally, Peaches was brought back into the storyline in episode 2 to connect with Henrietta, and I'll get to that in a minute. But soon after T saw that Cena had been arrested, Charles had two Colombians showing up at his front door looking for Dimitri. Notice that before Loco knocked at the door, Charles was finally working on the messed up walls, trying to get back in good graces with Lucille. And this caused Charles to show up at Terry's new restaurant to tell him and Meech, who Terry was on the phone with at the time. But at this point, Meech and T had no idea that this was actually the plug looking for them. But at this point, they thought it was someone from Cena's crew showing up to collect or to clean them out. Because of this, Meech told Terry to put security around their families. And Meech started looking for a new plug in Atlanta, and T started looking for a plug in Detroit. Meanwhile, in Atlanta, Meech was still sitting on a lot of weight. One of the reasons being that one of his distros, Dice, was dropped off at the end of episode 1. Dice had a pipeline from Alabama to Texas. At this point, Stacks offered to take the rest of the weight off of Meech's hands. But since Meech was now without a plug, his plan was to find out who Glock, the leader of the Miami Killers, plug was, because they were the only other crew in Atlanta who had a Colombian plug. Then we were introduced to Detective Bryant's ex-wife Gloria, who had turned over custody to Bryant in Season 2 because she was busy working all the time. They now need money for a lawyer to try to get Kevin out of juvie. Bryant told Gloria that he's applied for security jobs, but they were only paying $9 an hour. So much like Meech and T are in a desperate situation this episode without a plug, Bryant is even more desperate without a job, but needing money to help his son. Then we were introduced to Detective Veronica Jen's father, who is a restaurant owner. Her and Detective Amberson were eating at her father's restaurant, and her father said something very interesting to keep in mind. He asked Jen why she was so skinny, and told her that she needs to eat more. At this point, we also get a clue that Detective Jen may begin to start doing some shady things to try to take down Terry. Because when she told her father that Bryant got fired for coloring outside the lines, he told her sometimes it's more fun to color outside the lines. It makes the picture more interesting. We also see Charles and Lucille are now attending a new church. And at this church, there's a kid named Breeze who has a crush on Nicole. Now, who would have thought that Breeze would be introduced on BMF before raising Canaan? At this church, we also see that the pastor encourages her congregation to volunteer for something, and Lucille signed her Nicole up, only to bump into her high school sweetheart, Maurice, who Lucille went to prom with and is now a doctor. We also found out that Charles stole Lucille from Maurice when they were younger, and Maurice told Lucille that he was never able to get over her, as he gave her his card and asked her out to eat to catch up. So this will be very interesting to see how this plays out, especially when Charles finds out that Maurice is now in town. Then we got our first introduction to Henrietta, who T called Royal Oak, who does her business outside the city in the burbs. As Terry, Sterling, and Hoop walked into her spot, Sterling told Terry that he got connected with her through an associate of an associate, pretty much letting us know that he knew nothing about this character. Walking into the spot, they all thought that Royal Oak was a man. Turns out she was a female. Before Terry met Royal Oak, she was talking trash to a guy named Chester about hooking up with his lady. So Chester could potentially be an enemy to Royal Oak that Terry could potentially connect with moving forward. But T and Royal Oak agreed to do business together, even though T knew that her product was nowhere near as good as what he had coming in before. Royal Oak used T's desperation to her advantage and got T to agree to pay $28 a key for some stepped-on product, and she agreed to throw in a pound of weed for every key, which isn't much because back in those days a pound of weed probably only went for a couple $100s. Now just put it into perspective how bad a deal this was. Meech was selling his keys in Atlanta to Stacks for $25 a piece, and that was for pure weight. So T had agreed to pay several thousand more per key for an inferior product. So really he should have just walked away and never agreed to those terms. Then as Meech and Royal Oak was finishing their conversation, none other than Peaches walked into Royal Oak's gambling spot. Now we know that Royal Oaks kills Peaches at the end of the episode to take her to get a connect with pure weight. But my question is going back to season 2 when Peaches snitched on K9 telling the feds where those bodies were. It looks like the feds tried pulling Peaches into K9's case. So my question was she working as an informant when she went to do business with Royal Oak? T went from meeting Royal Oak to meeting the two Colombians who were at his parents' house looking for Meech, still not knowing it was the plug. And after being mad disrespectful, the dude told him if he wants to find Dimitri to go to Atlanta, that he's with Ty's crew. Most likely Loco was to connect to both Boom and Ty Washington. He told Terry that he needs to speak to Dimitri because Ty liked Dimitri and that he didn't want to do business with Terry because he smashed Boom's wife. While T was in the D agreeing to bad deals, Meech was in Atlanta trying to find out who Glock's connect was. His first shot was going to Greeny, but Greeny turned him down and said that he doesn't get into that side of the business anymore. At the same time, Meech was introduced to one of Greeny's ladies, a stripper named Angel, who Meech planned on using to find out the information about Glock's connect. So Meech requested special attention from Angel outside of the club and took her out to dinner. At dinner, Meech asked Angel for the name, but she didn't tell him at the time because part of her job is based on her using discretion. And she told Meech that she can't go back to Greeny without no money either. Meech told Angel that she needs to know her worth and that she deserves better. Definitely something to keep in mind moving forward on how this all plays out. While Meech was connecting with Angel for the first time, back in Detroit, T was reconnecting with Leanda now that Markeisha cut things off with him. He told Leanda that he broke things off with Markeisha because she wasn't worth risking his life and his family. So it will be very interesting to see how quick T goes running back to Markeisha the first time she calls, putting on her damsel in distress routine. And this will only cause more problems with Leanda moving forward now that he's trying to restore their relationship, only to most likely turn around and break Lewanda's heart again. Terry then told Leanda that he's going to be staying with her for a few days to make sure that she was safe. I'm thinking this was a lie, and the real reason he wanted to stay with Leanda because the only other place he had to go was to a hotel after buying Markeisha a house and moving out of his parents' house. Back in Atlanta, Meech showed up at a club that night, and soon after he saw a man putting hands on Angel. And Meech took it upon himself to beat the man down. This caused Angel to give Meech a dance where she gave him all the info that he needed. The big problem being that Greeny saw this all going down and was not happy about it at all. Something very important to keep in mind moving forward. Meech then went to meet up with a guy named Santiago. But when they arrived to the house, they found two Miami hitters dead on the ground. And Meech was introduced to Loco. Luckily, because it was actually all just a setup and the Miami hitters were going to kill Meech and Duffy, but the Colombian crew took out all of the Miami killers' hitters. Meech and his new plug Loco connected, and Loco will be delivering Meech 250 keys. But the thing is, someone set Meech up, and Meech believed it to be Angel who set him up, until the end of the episode when Greeny offered up free bottle service to Meech and his crew. This possibly lets us know that Green had something to do with the Miami Killers trying to set up Meech, and that it wasn't Angel. So the dynamic between Meech, Green, and Angel will definitely be interesting to see what happens moving forward. Getting me to the introduction of Blaze, who we later find out is an old school gangster and a former cop who has a payroll full of cops who is doing dirt for him. Like I mentioned earlier in the video, Bryant is desperate for money as he now turns to Blaze looking for some work to make some fast cash. Only to find out that Blaze is none other than Royal Oak's father, who set her up with a small crew and is now assigned Bryant to be a part of her crew moving forward. So Bryant and Royal Oak teaming up together will be bad news for BMF moving forward. Because once Terry found out that Meech got a plug, he went to meet up with Royal Oak and told her that he wasn't going to be doing business with her in the most disrespectful way possible, even taking her blunt and putting it in his mouth and walking out. Now normally, this wouldn't really cause any type of problems, but for two reasons going to. First off being how disrespectful Terry was when he reneged on the deal. Second being because Royal Oak is a spoiled rich girl who took offense to Terry stepping away from their agreement. And now that she killed Peaches, Royal Oak is even going to have a better plug and it's going to be a lot purer product than what she had been dealing with before, making her an even more powerful in the streets and plan to expand her business despite what her father had to say about it. I also mentioned in a video last week to keep in mind who is Detective Amberson's father because Detective Jim mentioned that he was a councilman. And when Sterling was telling T about Blaze, he said that he was connected to the city council. So there's a good chance that Blaze has connections to Councilman Amberson. Also, Detective Amberson also mentioned that she used to be addicted to drugs and that it was the only way that she could ever feel anything. Keep it in mind that Jen took 3 bricks when they were at Saint's crime scene, and her father told her that she's getting skinny. So is this a clue that Jen is now using cocaine? I know some people who thought that she took those 2 bricks to replace the ones that they lost in season 2. But they already replaced those 2 bricks in season 2 with synthetic coke. And her and Bryant also took 2 of the bricks they found on Diane, and we never found out what they did with them either. So Jen is either planning on setting somebody up or addicted to coke, most likely both. And the guy she might set up is the PA hitter who killed Saint, who Jen and Amberson are currently investigating. And there you have it. Leave your thoughts, theories, and predictions in the comments.